The Pacific Ocean crashed against the Malibu shoreline with its usual rhythm. But inside the beachfront home of Tom Hanks, an unusual silence had settled like fog. Max, a 7-year-old golden retriever with a coat the color of California sunshine, sat perfectly still by the front door, his brown eyes fixed on the wooden entrance as if willing it to open. It was November 2024, and everything had changed in an instant. 3 days earlier, Tom Hanks, the man who had rescued Max from a shelter as a puppy, who threw tennis balls until his arm got tired, who always saved the last bite of his breakfast, bacon for his 4-legged best friend, had been rushed to the hospital. A sudden health crisis that no one saw coming. One moment they were planning their usual morning beach run. The next moment paramedics were carrying Tom out on a stretcher while Max barked frantically, trying to follow. The house now felt hollow, despite being filled with Tom's presence in every corner. His reading glasses sat on the coffee table beside a half-finished biography. His favorite UCLA sweatshirt was draped over the back of the living room couch. The espresso machine in the kitchen stood silent, missing its daily 6 a.m. ritual. But Tom wasn't there, and Max couldn't understand why. Dogs don't comprehend hospitals or medical emergencies. They only know presence and absence, the comfort of routine and the distress of its disruption. And for Max, Tom's absence was a wound that grew deeper with each passing hour. The first morning without Tom, Max had waited by his bedroom door, tail wagging hopefully, expecting to hear the familiar sound of the alarm clock and Tom's groggy, "Good morning, buddy," but the door never opened. The bed remained empty, perfectly made by Rita the day before. When everything fell apart, Max had whimpered, scratched at the door gently with his paw, then finally lay down in the hallway, his head resting on his paws, eyes alert and watching, waiting. By the second day, Max had relocated his vigil to the front door. This was where Tom always returned from his trips, whether from film, shoots in distant locations, or quick runs to the grocery store. Max's internal logic was simple. If he waited here long enough, Tom would come home. He always came home. Rita Wilson, Tom's wife of over 3 decades, was splitting her time between the hospital and the house, torn between caring for her husband and comforting their worried companion. She would come home late at night, exhausted and red-eyed, to find Max in the exact same spot, as if he hadn't moved at all. "He's going to be okay, Max," she would whisper, kneeling beside the golden retriever and burying her face in his soft fur. "He's going to come home to us." But Max couldn't understand her words, only the sadness in her voice. He would lick her face gently, offering the only comfort he knew how to give, before returning his attention to the door. The house staff tried everything to coax Max away from his post. They brought his favorite treats, peanut butter biscuits that usually sent him into excited spins. They offered his beloved squeaky toys, the rope he loved to play tug-of-war with, even the tennis balls that normally drove him into a frenzy of joy. Max sniffed each offering politely but refused them all. His appetite had vanished along with Tom. He would only leave the front door for necessary bathroom breaks in the backyard, and even then he would rush back inside, checking frantically to make sure Tom hadn't returned while he was away. "The fastest bathroom breaks in canine history," the housekeeper joked sadly, though there was no humor in any of it. At night, when the house grew dark and quiet, Max would sometimes pad through the rooms, conducting his own investigation of Tom's absence. He would visit Tom's study, where scripts and books lined the walls, where the scent of Tom's cologne still lingered faintly in the air. Max would circle the leather desk chair 3 times before settling beneath it, nose pressed against the spot where Tom's feet usually rested. He explored the closet, pressing his nose against Tom's shoes, inhaling deeply, as if he could somehow piece together where his human had gone from these scent memories. He visited the bedroom, jumping carefully onto Tom's side of the bed and curling up on the pillow, seeking comfort in the fading warmth of his presence. But these nighttime wanderings always ended the same way, with Max returning to his post by the front door, resuming his faithful watch. The memories played in Max's mind like a film reel he couldn't shut off. He remembered the day Tom brought him home from the shelter, a scared, skinny puppy who had been abandoned by his previous owners. Tom had knelt down to Max's level, extended his hand for a sniff, and said with that famous gentle smile, "Hey there, buddy. How'd you like to come home with me?" Max had known immediately that this human was special. He remembered their morning routines. Tom would wake at dawn, and they'd head down to the beach before the tourists arrived. Tom would jog along the shoreline, while Max bounded through the waves, chasing seagulls and barking at the surf. Sometimes Tom would pause, hands on his knees, catching his breath, and Max would race back to check on him, tail wagging as if to say, "Come on, old man, keep up." "I'm not old," Tom would protest with a laugh. "I'm vintage. There's a difference." Then there were the quiet evenings when Tom would read scripts aloud, practicing his lines while Max lay at his feet. Max didn't understand the words, but he loved the sound of Tom's voice, warm, familiar, safe. Sometimes Tom would look down at him and say, "What do you think, Max? Too much? Not enough?" And Max's tail would thump against the floor in approval, because everything Tom did seemed perfect to him. Tom had even brought Max to film sets occasionally. Max remembered the excitement of those days. New people to meet, new smells to investigate, and always Tom nearby, introducing him to famous actors and directors. "This is Max," Tom would say proudly. "He's my most honest critic. He never lies about whether a scene works." On the fourth day of Tom's absence, Rita returned home earlier than usual, accompanied by Tom and Rita's children and several close family friends. Max's ears perked up at the sound of multiple car doors closing, and for a moment his heart leapt. Maybe Tom was with them. But when the door opened, Tom wasn't there. Max's tail, which had begun to wag hopefully, slowly lowered. Rita saw the disappointment in his eyes and felt her heart break a little more. "Come here, sweet boy," she said softly, and this time Max went to her, pressing his body against her legs, seeking and offering comfort simultaneously. The house filled with quiet conversations, with people speaking in hushed, worried tones. Max moved among them like a furry therapist, resting his head on knees, accepting gentle pats, seeming to understand that everyone was suffering the same absence he felt. Colin Hanks, Tom's son, sat on the floor and pulled Max close. "He's asking about you, buddy," Colin whispered into Max's ear. "Dad's asking about you every day. He wants to know if you're eating, if you're okay. You've got to hang in there for him." Max whined softly, as if he understood, as if he was trying to send a message back. "Tell him to come home. Tell him I'm waiting." That afternoon, while the family gathered in the living room, Rita had an idea. She went to Tom's study and retrieved something Max hadn't seen before, a small digital voice recorder. Tom had been working on his memoir before the medical emergency, recording his thoughts and memories in his own voice. Rita brought the device to the living room, where Max had returned to his post by the door. She sat beside him, stroked his head gently, and pressed play. Tom's voice filled the room. Chapter 3. The Day I Met Max. I've played a lot of roles in my life. An astronaut, a soldier, a castaway, even a guy who finds a big piano in a toy store. But no role has been more important than being Max's human. Max's head snapped up, ears fully alert. He recognized that voice. He spun in a circle, looking for the source, searching every corner of the room. Where was Tom? The voice was here. But Tom wasn't. The confusion in Max's eyes was heartbreaking. Rita quickly stopped the recording, realizing it might be causing more distress than comfort. But Max whined and pawed at her hand, asking in his way for more. She looked at Colin, who nodded encouragingly. She pressed play again. Tom's voice continued, "Max taught me something important. That loyalty isn't just about sticking around when things are good. It's about the quiet faithfulness of just being there. He doesn't care if a movie bombs or wins awards. He doesn't care about box office numbers or critical reviews. He just cares that I come home, that I throw his tennis ball, that I scratch that spot behind his ears he can't quite reach himself." Max lay down, resting his chin on his paws, and listened. His eyes remained open and alert, but something in his posture softened. For the next hour, the family took turns playing. Tom's recordings, stories about their life together, funny anecdotes about Max's puppyhood, reflections on the simple joy of a dog's companionship. It became a daily ritual. Each afternoon, someone would sit with Max and play Tom's voice. It wasn't the same as having Tom there, but it seemed to bring Max a measure of peace. At least he could hear that voice, be reminded of the bond they shared. Days turned into a week, then two. The vigil continued. Rita brought updates from the hospital. Tom was stable. He was improving. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. Max would tilt his head when she spoke, as if trying to understand, trying to extract meaning from the tone, if not the words. Tom's friends and colleagues stopped by to check on Max and offer support to the family. Ron Howard came by and threw tennis balls with Max in the backyard. The first time Max had shown any interest in play since Tom left. Steven Spielberg visited and sat quietly with Max, understanding that sometimes the best comfort is simply presence. Tom told me once that Max saved his life. Steven said to Rita as they watched the golden retriever stare at the door. He said adopting Max pulled him out of a dark period, gave him something to care for beyond himself. I think now Max is trying to return the favor, keeping faith alive, refusing to give up.